So hello to everyone, and it's nice to see people. And it's nice to also be out on a winter night, but be in, right? Be at an event, but not have to leave the warm coziness of your house. Or for me, my office. So I'd like to begin with a bracha, lasok b'divrei Torah, and you're welcome to join with me. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lasok b'divrei Torah. Thank you, God, for commanding us to do actions of Torah. And amen. Well, you can say
that I know.
Actually, that's a thing. You don't say amen to your own bracha. So, Myra Tiski mitzvot, you should, that is an incredible phrase that we can all learn. Tiske or Tiski mitzvot or Tisku mitzvot, that we should have the opportunity to do many more mitzvot. We, for this synagogue, way before I got here, for years and years and years and decades, I think you guys would send Shiva meals to the families, from the Jewish Center, but we're now also sending them from new babies.
Oh,
So,
nice.
We did one today, and we got to thank you today, Rabbi.
Lovely.
David and Michelle.
Yeah, so we're excited for that, God willing, bris later in the week at the Jewish Center. Yeah. I'm happy to do as many brisses, be at as many brisses as we have funerals, or, an equal number. We should be able to do both. So this is actually, I think, a little bit more, less of a discussion session one and more about lots of text. And this has to do with the history of the idea of mitzvah, which we have discussed a little bit the first time, but it is certainly an interesting topic. So Gila, when you were a school director, how many kids do you think thought that mitzvah was good deed?
Many,
right. And it is interesting for any of us who are in Jewish education to try to trace that etymology, to figure out what happened. How did the word commandment from commander and a command get to become good deed? And then there's another really interesting use of mitzvah that I've seen in the last 2 or 3 years. Like something can irk you, maybe this one irks me. It is families calling their bar or bat mitzvahs. They'll say, I have a mitzvah. And I'm like, yeah, we all have mitzvah. We have like 613 of them. But it has become the modern, maybe even the last 5 years, I'm going to a mitzvah. And I literally, it took me a couple months to figure out what they were talking about. It sounds odd to the ear. If you're of our generations, it sounds odd to the ear to say, I have a mitzvah. I would be curious, Lee, I'm going to out you a little bit. In the community you grew up in, which was quite a religious community, do you think anyone there thinks of mitzvah as good deed?
That's an interesting question.
Like, has it into the Orthodox community, or is it just the non-Orthodox Jews that think somehow it's good deed?
I mean, I think it's both, but there was definitely more of an emphasis on, like, it's a commandment, it's a thing you must do so that you don't get smited and all of that stuff.
Yeah, interesting.
I don't know what she's talking about.
Well, I used to say that mitzvah is a commandment. A mitzvah, which is Yiddish for a good deed. So it came from Eastern Europe and become a good deed.
I really like that distinction, a mitzvah versus a mitzvah.
Right.
Mitzvah. I like it. Although I would think in the ultra-Orthodox community, it would still be commandment. And it still is commandment for me and for all of us. It's just also how we see what the rest of the world does. So we're going to run through some texts to see how the idea of mitzvah has developed over time. and I would love to watch my my throat and not be the only reader. You should hear other voices. So could someone volunteer to read the Hebrew first for the first
Well,
text?
the Hebrew is not clear at all. It didn't come up well in the printing. It's
Really?
yeah, you see that?
I don't, because I'm looking, I have it printed out.
Oh.
The Hebrew is really cockeyed.
Yeah, it's not, I can read it, but it's very difficult.
I'm going to look up on this for 1 second and see if it's different on this one. Hold on 1 sec. I feel terrible about that.
All the Hebrew is not readable. Right?
I'm sorry about that. And please, I'm so sad about it because my Hebrew that I'm reading is perfect here.
I can read it if you want, the first one.
Vayomer Hashem el
Mila,
Moshe.
maybe you can try it in what I put into the chat. Maybe you can call that up on the screen and it'll come out better. I put the pages back
Actually,
into the
Gila,
chat.
I'll do the first one and then you do the second one. It's longer. Vayomer Hashem, Vayomer Adonai.
Excuse me. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
There's nothing in the chat.
No, we have,
Well,
here, wait a minute. What we'll do is
Let
use
me-
that
let
one.
me
We'll
try-
switch them then. Take a
I
look.
brought it up on Safaria. If that would help, I could share screen and have it on
No,
Safaria.
I can share the screen, but that's okay. We can use the
Oh yeah,
English
great.
as-
Okay.
We
Just
can
the
use the English
handout
as well.
once again.
I really want to be able to,
Nothing
I didn't want to share screen because I want to be able to, for us to all see each other. So it's okay. We'll use the English and we have the Hebrew here as well. Vayomer Hashem el Moshe, ale Elai hahara. God said to Moshe, come up to me on the mountain. Vehayesham. And, in the English I have says, and wait there. I think it says, and be there. Vehayesham, just be there. Vetnana lecha et luchot ha'even v'torah v'hamitzvah asher katavti l'horotam. And I will give you the stone tablets and the Torah and the mitzvah that I have inscribed, that I've written for you to teach. Okay, this is a problematic verse. The Torah doesn't give us words that are extraneous. So someone talked to me about Veha Torah, Veha Mitzvah. So we are getting the Luchot, which are the stone tablets that Moshe ends up smashing, and Veha Torah, and the Torah, Veha Mitzvah, and the commandment, which I inscribed for you to teach. What do you make of this, anyone? Why does it say you're getting the stone tablets and the Torah and the mitzvah? Not, and I would say not in Gila's mitzvah language, but mitzvah language. Why are there ands? What are the ands doing here? Are we getting something in addition to the luchot, the stone tablets?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it clearly feels like something else is being given here.
So I read somewhere, I don't remember where, but I read that Luchot HaEven, it's the 10 Commandments.
Nachon, yes.
And the Torah is the written Torah, and the mitzvah is the oral Torah.
Yes.
I read it somewhere. I don't know who said that.
Yeah, no, the Chazal said it. That's fine.
Right.
Chazal. It's a good catch-all. Chazal, whenever we want to say the rabbis, Chazal means Chachamenu Zichronam Livracha, our wise ones of blessed memory. We call them Chazal. And yeah, Chazal sees this as a problem. I see it as a problem. You see it as a problem, that there have to be 3 different things here. The first one is the actual stone tablets. The second one is the oral law. So and the third one is, the third one's written Torah, and the third one's the oral law. So talk to us about somebody. volunteer to explain the difference between the oral law and the written law? On one foot, by the way, meaning quickly. Written law.
Written law is Torah, right?
Yeah, 5 books of Moses. By the way, all you people who saw those 2 mistakes we found in our Torah last year, they've been repaired. Those Torahs are now, as of today, back in the rotation. Get a nice sofer here this week. Yeah, 5 books. So what Gila in the name of the rabbis is translating mitzvah here as the oral law. What's the oral law?
What's come after the Tanakh, after the Tanakh, after the written Torah, like Mishnah, Talmud.
Right, exactly. Mishnah and Talmud. So all of the laws, for those of you who were here for Shaul Magid's lecture, all the writings of the post-Pharisaic time, all the writings of the rabbis starting in around the year 200, maybe some of the writings were a little earlier, but collected in the year 200, right? And what the Torah here is saying about them is really critical, which is that when were the oral laws that were actually written by the rabbis? The Mishnah written in the year 200, the Talmud written in the year like 5 to 550. What is the Torah saying about when they were written or given? It's like a critical piece of how to understand rabbinic understanding of law. Yeah, Jane, your hand. Yeah, on Mount Sinai. On Mount Sinai.
Yeah.
So even though Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi wrote down the words in the north of Israel, and the Talmud's written in like Surah and Pampadita in Babylon, no, this text of the Torah is saying to us, no, these rules were given at Mount Sinai, and you can trace them back all the way to Mount Sinai. These are part of what was given by God. It's important for us to know that this is how much of, well, all of rabbinic Judaism until the Enlightenment saw oral law, until we have a historical vision of how Judaism developed. Oral law, written law, same thing, just as good. Okay. Interesting, because that, what Gila was saying, that idea that 10 Commandments, written law, oral law are all different, makes sense to us because we've lived that understanding. I don't know if it's what they originally intended. Maybe it's and what was commanded. I don't know. I don't think any of us can know. So let's go to this next text. And this is the one where we want the first line to be heard. V'zot hamitzvah hachukim v'hamishpatim asher tziva Adonai Elohechem. This is the mitzvah and the chukim and the mishpatim that God, your God, has commanded you to teach. What's the difference in these words? Let's not use the English. The English is actually sort of hard. Ha-mitzvah. What's mitzvah?
Commandment.
Commandment, maybe, we don't know. Maybe law. We don't know. We only know from context. And hachukim v'hamishpatim. So the way this sentence is written, it feels like to me that it's mitzvah, the commandment or commandments, colon, which are the chukim and the mishpatim. That makes sense to anyone else? Which are the chukim and the mishpatim. We'll at a later time discuss what chukim and mishpatim are, but basically, one, according to Rashi, chukim are laws that like you You don't understand, but you do. What's an example of them?
The red cow, the red heifer.
The red heifer. What's an example of them that you do? Kosher. Like there's no like, all right, keep kosher. Or shatnez, don't mix fabrics. Just do them. I can't really explain to you what you're going to get out of it. Just do it. And then there are mishpatim, and Rashi says that mishpatim are
Rabbinic?
No, they are who said that? The laws that the umot haolam, that the world would have figured out anyway. That in order to create a just society, we would figure out that you shouldn't murder or steal. So mishpatim, the laws that we use to conduct society. Okay, someone want to read the text in English now? So it's not just me reading. The whole text, the Deuteronomy text.
Rini, go ahead.
Rini, go ahead. Great.
And this is the instruction, the laws and the rules that the Lord your God has commanded me to impart to you, to be observed in the land that you are about to cross into and occupy, so that you, your children, and your children's children may revere the Lord your God and follow, as long as you live, all God's laws and commandments that I enjoin upon you, to the end that you may long endure. Obey Israel willingly and faithfully, that it may go well with you, and that you may increase greatly in a land flowing with milk and honey, as the Lord, the God of your ancestors, spoke to you.
So, what do I read from this text in a joking way? If I don't live in the land of Israel, maybe I can eat a cheeseburger, because these laws really say they apply to in the land of Israel. It's joke. It's a joke. It's a joke. It's not true. But, you know, and I won't say cheeseburger. I'm from Philadelphia, so I would say cheesesteak, you know, land of my forefathers and mothers. Okay, so remember, Dvarim, Deuteronomy, was an added book. It's a summary of the first 4 books. It's written a little later, we believe. And that in that first line is, here's the mitzvah, and we have in this understanding called mitzvah, things that are mitzuveh, that are commanded to you, 2 different kinds of laws, chukim and mishpatim. And you're going to live and obey them. Why are you going to obey them according to this?
Oh.
So you live longer.
Live a long life.
Yeah, and where?
In Israel.
In Israel.
Yeah.
And will also obey them.
And that what?
Your children and your children's children.
Yes, so that you have created some sort of framework where not just you, but it's the next generation. They're not a set of laws that are created just for you, but they'll move on. Okay. Anyone have any?
It doesn't say that you don't have to obey them if you're somewhere else.
Well, I'm a snarky rabbinic reader, and I read it that way, right? You're right, but it doesn't say I have to. It said these are the laws you say in the land of Israel.
No, that's not how I read it. I read it that these are the laws, and you happen to be going to Israel, and you're going to follow them there.
Right. You are going to the land of Israel. You should follow them there. And of course, we will follow them not there as well. Mike, do you have a comment or question?
Yes, Rabbi.
Yeah.
We get Shiva and Shema Ve'ohavta. The whole thing after that is also from Deuteronomy.
Yeah, we're about to look at it.
Okay.
The next text. Andrew?
I know you were joking, but rather than say that if you're outside of Israel, you don't have to obey them, could we read it as you don't have to obey all of them until you have gone into Israel?
Well, actually, that's an interesting way of reading it. It's many of them, many of the mitzvot apply only to the land of Israel. So for instance, the biggest one, of course, is all the laws of Shemitah. happen only in the land of Israel, of the 7th year, leaving it fallow. Also, every law pertaining to korbanot, pertaining to sacrifices, applies not only in the land of Israel, but only in the Beit HaMikdash, only in the temple. So we can't do those. We can do Shemitah now. And Shemitah is done in the state of Israel now, the land of Israel. But we can't do the ones that are about sacrifice because there's no temple. So it's a lovely reading. It's beautiful. All right, let's go to the text that Mike figured out was going to be next, which is part of the Shema.
You want me to keep reading?
No, I loved your reading, but let's have someone else read in English. Unless we have no other volunteers, but come on, people. Come on, people now. Mickey.
If then you obey the commandments that I enjoin you upon you this day, loving the Lord your God and serving God with all your heart and soul, and I will grant the rain for your land in season, the early rain and the late. You shall gather in your new grain and wine and oil. I will also provide grass in the fields for
Okay, so we can stop. We get the idea, which is, if you do these commandments, then what?
It'll rain.
Right, you'll eat.
You'll
Yeah,
be
things will
rewarded
go
with,
well. Things will go well.
Yeah, you'll have your basic needs met. It's certainly, this is, I think, one of the more difficult, theologically problematic, difficult texts in the Torah, right? Anyone want to say why it might be problematic for me or you or someone? Yeah, Rini.
Well, bad things happen to good people.
Right.
So even if you obey all the commandments, people get sick and not just dying, but they, have other things happen to them. So and the Holocaust especially is.
And especially for this one, you don't even need to go to the outside to the other bad things. Lots of people starve in the world because they don't have enough rain or they have too much rain.
Right.
So hard text to understand. Yeah, Michael, did you want to say something? But you're on Zoom. You're on mute, Michael Golden. Michael Golden, yeah.
You shouldn't do a mitzvah because you're going to get a reward for it.
Okay, well, who came up with that one?
Maimonides?
No,
it's early.
Hillel.
All right, so Al Manat Lekabel Pras. It's in Pirkei Avot. It's early on in the Mishnah in Pirkei Avot, because the rabbis realized the same thing that you realized. Bad things sometimes happen to good people. As my colleague, beloved colleague, Harold Kushner wrote, bad things happen to good people, but the rabbis in Pirkei Avot in the year 200 knew that bad things happen. And so they wanted to mediate this text a little bit by saying exactly what Michael Golden just said. They said it first, though, which is, don't do a mitzvah al menat lekabel pras, in order to get a prize, which really goes against what this Torah piece is saying. But I think they had to do that because there were too many thoughtful people who said, wait a second. The rabbis still wanted us to do the mitzvot. But what we say in the Shema feels hard to say after there have been so many famines. By the way, of course, there's famines all over Genesis. So Jane and then Rini, and then we'll move on.
The one narrow way of reading it where it actually makes sense is that you do the mitzvot of taking care of the environment.
Yep.
God will give you rain and you'll be able to eat. But that's one set of mitzvot.
I mean, I get it, except here I see where you're going and I like it because it's a beautiful way of saying we should take care of the environment, except I don't think that Abraham was doing anything bad for the environment then, or Jacob was doing anything bad for the environment then, or Boaz, Ruth and Naomi. And, those are all famines that happened in the time of the Bible. So I like your reading, but it doesn't
Yeah, I know.
It doesn't play with the other famines that already happened during the time of the Bible before we use fossil fuels. So it's nice, but okay. So anyone else? Oh, right, Rini and then Mike, and then we're going to move on.
Yeah, I was just going to comment that it says, if you obey the commandments, loving the Lord your God and serving God with all your heart and soul, I will grant rain. So maybe it's conditional on your attitude. If you just do it for the prize, it doesn't count. But if you live your life, truly, then maybe things won't be so bad, or they'll be good, or it's a little narrower, perhaps.
I can see how one would read it that way. I just feel like I'm kind of happier with the honesty of the reward and punishment piece.
Oh, yeah. I don't read it that way. I just was looking at it and thought,
yeah,
maybe
you could, right. This is really like classical reward and punishment, which we kind of don't think is true, or many of us don't think is true. Okay, so I'm going down to some of the questions.
Mike?
Oh, yes, Mike, go ahead.
Yes, there's been a lot of work done on you shall love the Lord thy God. How can you command someone to love somebody unless you're God?
What? Wait, tell me the question. Oh, how can you command love? Yeah, I think you're right. You're right. It is hard to command love. It's a hard thing. It's hard to command any kind of emotion. And yet we are taught to. What's the line in the song, Lee?
The Lo Yavud and the Almana or Kabel Cross line.
Oh, okay, great. We will look at that later. We'll bring that up. So why do you think the mitzvot were connected to the land here or in any of the texts?
Well, it was an agricultural society.
Yeah.
They lived off the land. The animals, they did, the animals did.
Okay, Lana?
I'm in agreement. That's how they prospered as a nation. And Hashem, he has like free will, but I still believe that he wanted their devotion out of their hearts, because he would have taken care of them anyway. So
maybe, although we do know, as I was noting earlier, that sometimes our people are not taken care of.
Yeah.
So, which is just, and so it's about how do you get to continue to do mitzvot even when you don't feel totally like all your needs are met. It's a hard one. All right, I'd like to move on if that's okay. Is that all right? Good. So I just wanted to show you with these texts, I'm less interested in their questions, and think about that in order for there to be a mitzvah in the Torah, there has to be a mitzvah. In order for there to be some kind of commandment, there's some kind of commander. So who was writing these commandments? Who's the commander? Maybe it's not just one person or one being. I just want to sort of put it out there, if you've gone to any of the Great Debates lectures, that some people think that the Torah and the commandments are God-given, godly inspired. And many people believe that this, not even believe, but know that this is an edited text. And so the things that wind up in the text we're put here for a reason. We're authored and put here to teach us something. A lot of this talk of doing mitzvot is connected to teaching, right? I want to continue it and not have it. This is mitzvah is not just about me doing a mitzvah, but the next generation doing it as well. And maybe it's about how we relate back to this idea of being commanded. So I want you to just think for a moment. You don't have to share it, but think about, have you thought about who's the commander in the mitzvot that you do? And maybe it's God, but maybe it's the community. Maybe it's sometimes your family or Jewish history.
Your conscience.
Your conscience, yeah. Right. Right. Exactly. And maybe it's also the chachamim, the wise editors. You know, many of us talk about the Torah being an edited document by many different editors. So what are the values that this word mitzvah is teaching? This idea of there are things that we must do. Okay, so we're now going to go to my favorite text. This is like my favorite text. So beginning of Pirkei Avot. And so who would like to read it? Moshe Kibel Torah Sinai. You can read it in English.
I will.
Yep.
I'll read it. I don't mind.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure. Moshe received the Torah on Sinai and handed it down to Joshua
Joshua or Yehoshua?
Yehoshua. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you. Yehoshua. I always get it confused, but you know who I meant. Yeah. Thank you. Yehoshua. To the elders to the prophets, and the prophets handed it down to the men of the great assembly. They said three things: be deliberate in judgment, raise up many disciples, and make a fence around the Torah.
Okay, so first Mishnah of Pirkei Avot, first Mishnah in the Mishnah, and my favorite one. So probably already, even though I've only been here a year and a half, you've probably heard me teach it a few times already. So why is this here? The beginning part, the Reisha, beginning of a Mishnah in Aramaic, the Reisha and the Seifa, we divide it into two parts. The first part, Moshe received the Torah on Mount Sinai and handed it down to Joshua to the elder. Why is this here? Yes, Stephen.
To give justification to the rabbis for doing what they're doing.
To give justification for the rabbis, Chazal, for Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, for Rabbi Judah the Prince, to write the Mishnah and to rewrite all of Jewish culture, right? So this is 130 years after the destruction of the temple, and all of Jewish culture now is going to be going from being temple-centered to being to being diaspora-centered or not temple-centered. Although they were still in the north of Israel, they knew it was 130 years already. Maybe the temple wasn't going to be rebuilt, but they had to have their authenticity somehow. And so they wrote this, that these laws that you are getting on Mount Sinai, that you're getting today in this book, that you're going to learn, you know what? This is the direct line. So you shouldn't question that. What's the next, the Seifa? Anyone want to continue? What's this telling us? Be deliberate in judgment, raise up many disciples, va'asu siag laTorah, make a fence around the Torah. So why these things? Yeah, Jane.
So, well, I like what you just said. So it's making the whole, like you say, it's giving legitimacy to all the interpretation and connecting it to the Torah that was given on Sinai. And make a fence around the Torah is a way of saying that you should talk about laws and interpret them. And because fence around the Torah, you kind of take them, not just what's written in the Torah, but you extend them to make sure that people are less likely to violate the one in the Torah. I'm not that very articulate. But.
Right, no, you are. Make a fence around the Torah and make a little bit more laws. Make some more laws so that the laws in the Torah don't get broken, which the rabbis were really excellent about that, right? My favorite is the concept of muktzah. Anyone know what muktzah is?
The 30 the things you're not supposed to touch on Shabbat?
Yes, the real law is I'm not supposed to strike a match or spend money, but so because of that, I can't touch those things or move them. That becomes a mitzvah. That's the fence around the Torah. So I'm kind of interested in be deliberate in judgment. Why is that their first one? That's the very first thing they're teaching in Pirkei Avot, in the one ethical treatise. Why that? Be deliberate in judgment. Yeah, Suzanne.
Because it's really consequential to make a judgment.
Right, and they're really talking about I think they're talking about judgments of law, of adjudicating how law gets done, how mitzvah means law here, gets done and changed and turned around, and be very careful how you do it. They know they're creating this whole new society, and they know you got to be careful with it. Eleni.
Yeah, I'm thinking that it's a reminder not just to follow things blindly. That even though there are commandments, you still need to consider them. And I think it gives, a little bit of agency, just as the rabbis themselves took agency after the destruction of the temple. It's they did discerning.
That is interesting. I have not thought about it that way. So I now have to sit and let that percolate, because that is really interesting. Because I think it's a little counter I like the reading because it works for me, but I'm not sure because they were trying to get people, or 1800 years ago, to follow their laws and to not make such change in them. So I now have to.
It's part of the contradictions that are part of the rabbinic tradition, where throughout that tradition that we've inherited, there are so many disagreements and arguments, and sometimes they end with elu ve'elu, these and these. So I think that this first sentence hints at it holds that creative tension. Here are the laws, you need to do them. But there's a reminder that there is big discussion around it all.
Okay, I would get that there's discussion around it and there's thoughtfulness around it. Yeah. So I have Mike and then Lee. I saw Lee's hand. I don't know where she is though. Mike?
Yes, a more modern example. If you're in a restaurant and you're sitting near a table and near a window, and you're eating fish and veggies, somebody can walk by and say, even though you're wearing kippah, maybe you're eating what you shouldn't be eating. Say fence around the Torah.
Right. Well, that's lots of us. Many people in the Orthodox community now choose not to eat out in restaurants, and many of us in our community do, and build our fences differently. Yeah. Is Lee still on? Because she had raised her hand. Okay.
Yeah, I'm probably on your second page of the screen.
Oh, great. Okay.
I was gonna say, I think it speaks to the importance of the interpersonal aspect of, be careful with your judgment. Following all these nitpicky laws is good, but like it's about trying to have a decent society and be good to other people, and not doing it for law's sake, but for like decency's sake.
And that is really, that plays off what Eleni was saying. So now I have to think about what both of you said, because they are new, interesting, and lovely readings of it. Gila, Hamora Gila.
I think it's a sociological statement of the time. It says, we are not priests, we are not Kohanim, so we will be deliberate in judgment, not like the priests. We will teach everybody, not only the Leviim and the Kohanim, and we will do Siag LaTorah. We're not going to go like this. We're going to change because we are not Kohanim. I think it's a statement of who we are.
An anti-priestly text. That's interesting. I would sociologically think that could be totally true. Yeah, that's interesting. Eleni, you're gonna go
just
back to
another idea is that this discerning is suggesting that you live your life, that you discern all of your actions through the lens of this legacy that we've inherited.
Beautiful. I feel like I could stop now, but we got a lot of text to go because these are such beautiful things. So this curriculum.
Rabbi Laura had her hand up.
Oh, Laura, I'm so sorry. Laura, go. Laura? Laura?
Laura, your mute is off. You're good.
We don't hear you though. Do you want to turn your mic up? Your microphone? We have mics on the thing. I'll say microphone.
Laura, I'll chat with you and let you know how to do it.
Okay. And if you have a TV or someone talking on behind you, if you could turn your thing off, that would be good. We're going to go to the next one, or maybe Laura, you can write it in the chat. So we're going to go really quickly the next one because we already kind of did it, which is Antigonos of Socho received the tradition from Shimon HaTzadik. He used to say, don't be like the servants who serve the master in order to receive a reward. So we did this already. We brought it up already. Okay, so now we're getting modern. Yeshaya Leibovich. Is everyone there? I'm at text 6. Hold on 1 second. I'm on a different one than you. Right? Modern philosopher and Israeli philosopher. You know his sister, Nechama, the great Torah commentator. So who would like to read Yeshayahu Leibowitz?
I'll read it.
Thank you. Who was that?
Myra.
Myra, thanks.
Man can worship God only by committing himself to the observance of mitzvot, which are the expression of the divine will, and not means for the satisfaction of human needs, not even of their spiritual needs.
So you can disagree with this. Many people do, but this is what Leibovich believes. And there's a large number of practicing Jews who believe this. A person only worships God by observing mitzvot, and we shouldn't do mitzvot for any other reason, even spiritual reasons. Definitely there are people who, probably all of you disagree with this, but lots of Jews believe this. So anyone want to say anything about it?
So is it that that all laws are the type that you don't really understand, but you do them because they're laws?
All law is law, all law is equal, and all law is done because we submit to God. That is his understanding of mitzvah. So you don't have to like or dislike these, you just have to know them, because this is, in terms of interpretations of what mitzvah means, he's a pretty important thinker of the 20th century. Lots of people follow him. Yeah, Myra?
Yeah, I think it's indicating that the mitzvot are primary for serving God, and humans have all different needs. So we can't categorize humans. Some may find it spiritually effective, others may not, and we won't ever get agreement that way. It's just blanket for the purpose of serving God. Makes sense.
Well, I mean, his thing is, don't look for that spiritual high.
Right.
Just do the mitzvot. That is our job. Okay, we're going to go down to a piece of Talmud now. Genesis Rabbah, not Talmud. Rav Amar, although I think this is from. The mitzvot were given only in order. I'm going to read it in Hebrew. Rav Amar lo nitnu ha-mitzvot ella b'tzaref bahen etz habriot. Only to refine our personalities, refine humanity. This is in 180-degree distinction to Leibovitz. They disagree 100%, right? Right? We are only given mitzvot in order to make us more refined human beings. What do you think? Do either or both of them speak to you? So the end of that one is because the Holy One of Blessing doesn't care whether a person kills an animal by the throat or the nape of its neck. So this is saying, you know, there's a way to kill an animal and make it kosher. And the actual rabbi from Breshit Rabbah, from the ancient Midrash, is saying the only reason we have these laws is to refine our personalities. Yeah, Eleni.
Yeah, I mean, if I think about refining and translate it very generously as being mindful, that we should do things, you know, thoughtfully, not by rote. It kind of goes back to that first part of Pirkei Avot and discerning. I know that in Pirkei Avot it's about courts. I mean, that's the specific reference, if I remember correctly. But to make it applicable to this discussion, which is so interesting, is that individuals have responsibilities for, you know, wrestling with this, discerning and doing something with it. So if you can think of refining as that, then it's that, and refining maybe in a more pedestrian way is, you know, it civilizes us. It makes humans not just animals.
Beautiful, beautiful. I just wanted to get one check on the Hebrew before then. I have Allison, then Rini. Rini or Renee? I forget it. Rini, good. So Rini, then well, Allison then. Gila, litzaref, siruf is a refinement through fire, right?
It's a refinement of gold. Make the gold pure.
But usually through some kind of heating.
Soref is the one who makes jewelry.
Okay.
Right, so you make the gold pure.
But my understanding is that it comes with some sort of heating.
Yes.
You're actually heating it, so it's doing something and changing the actual
purified,
right, and changing it in some way, and that's where we take that very concrete word to mean something about our personalities. Okay, so Allison, yeah, go ahead.
So it's interesting. So refining ourselves is a good way of looking at it, but it's refining ourselves not just for ourselves, but for the world around us, for our community, for others. Living with others as well.
Maybe, but he's really, the Rob is saying this is every single mitzvah, like lighting Shabbos candles and shatnez and not stealing. Every single mitzvah has the purpose of refining us. Rini. And then Sam Daly Harris.
Yeah, I was going to say that sometimes you do things because they're commanded, but after a while, they refine you. You may not even notice it, but they become so much a part of you that it changes your behavior in a good way by just sometimes doing things by rote, evolves into doing them for the good reasons.
Yes, and we hope. And in fact, in rabbinic tradition, there is an idea of mitoch shelo lishma, ba lishma. So something is commanded, you do something not lishma, for its own sake, but eventually you keep doing it enough and then you do it for its own sake, even though there's no prize or something for it. Sam. And then I think Lee and then Gila. I didn't know if hands were raised. Sam.
Okay, so I don't want to be a troublemaker, but my question keeps being which commandments? And the answer is all of them, but not really.
No, it's all of them.
Well, okay, so here's where my troublemaking comes.
Or wait, Sam, it's all of them that you could potentially do when there's no temple standing.
Well,
which
let me
means
say that,
very few of them.
So after a 50-year break, I came back 3.5 years ago, and I go Minyans tomorrow morning and Shabbat, and I keep reading the Torah reading in English. And as a 33-year vegetarian, I don't not only not like the commandment to sacrifice animals, and this last reading brought it up in a different way, but I'm repulsed by it. So I'm back to which commandments, all of them, but not really. And it's just, it's
okay.
It's a little
So,
crazy.
well, so I'm going to answer that directly and not leave it on the table or in the parking lot, as we would say. But, you know, we learned early in the Torah that not being a vegetarian is really a concession, and that really in the beginning of the Torah we were. And I too, like many other people, have issues with the sacrifices. And if you look in our prayer book, our Lev Shalem, but even before Lev Shalem and Sidor Sim Shalom, you can do the Musaf service. I do the alternative Amida in the Musaf service. I don't do the traditional one. I do the one that doesn't talk about doing sacrifices. The change in the 60s that our prayer books made were, we said the words in the Musaf service, Asu v'hi krivu, we did do these commandments, but now we've gone to the next step where we've rewritten the Amidah to not mention the sacrifices, but to going up, to having unity into Jerusalem, to having unity, but to sort of writing them out. And look, I'm writing Divrei Torah now with kids. They're writing them. I'm supervising them with kids who are writing them for Leviticus. So they're all dealing with this now. And they come in saying, this was icky and it's bloody. And more than one of them says, I don't like this. And it's wasteful. So the one thing I will say is, besides the burnt offerings in the temple, the other offerings were used for food, were used to feed people. So it wasn't as wasteful as we think. And yes, many people agree with you, and thus our Sidurim, our prayer book. Bye, Lenny. Our prayer book believes what you believe. And I encourage those of you who come to services on Shabbat to read the alternative Musaf Amida, the Musaf Amida that doesn't glorify going back and doing sacrifices. So yes, some, not all of the mitzvot. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to move on. I know there are more hands, but I really have a few more texts to do, and I have a drop dead 8:15 cutoff. So text C. So Ron Isaacs is my colleague. He used to be the rabbi in Bridgewater. Anyone know him? Yeah, good guy. His wife is an incredible Jewish educator and professor at the seminary, Jewish education, Leora. I just saw her a little bit ago. She's fabulous. This is Ron. Ron writes this. Who's going to write? Following the approach of the Enlightenment. Who could read? Najat, thank you. And welcome back.
Thank you. Following the approach of the Enlightenment, can you hear me properly? Sorry.
Yes,
Yeah, okay.
we hear you. Beautiful.
Mendelssohn maintains that if the true doctrines of religion are based on reason, divine revelation is no longer needed as a source of truth. Here, Mendelssohn deviates sharply from Maimonides, for whom man's knowledge of truth is derived from both reason and revelation. Mendelssohn asserts that if Judaism is revealed, it cannot be a religion, and if Judaism is a religion, it cannot have been revealed. Mendelssohn solves this dilemma by defining Judaism not as a revealed religion, but as revealed law. The central religious tenets of Judaism, the existence and unity of God, and the immortality of the soul, are not specific Jewish notions, but doctrines of the general religion of reason, which requires no act of revelation to be understood. For Mendelssohn, that distinguishes the Jew from the non-Jew. What distinguishes, the Jew from the non-Jew is not one's religion, which is the common property of all people of reason, but the unique laws and commandments, which he calls ceremonies, that were disclosed at Mount Sinai.
So really provocative, right? Right? The laws are what makes us distinctly Jewish, but those laws should not fool us into thinking that when we say one God and that souls live on, that is for everyone. This is more a designator. Anyone want to say anything before we move on? I'm going to skip his text and let you read that on your own. It's really the explanation of that. To go to, because I want to get to Eisen and I want to get to my Kaplan. So I'm going to go to D, mitzvah as a nostalgic act, which sounds a little derogatory, except I don't know. I think nostalgia, the older you get, the more nostalgia is a good thing, right? Yeah. Okay. Who hasn't read and who could read Dr. Eisen's? Well, by the way, I just wanted to say one thing. Hold on one thing. If you do not own, I know there's a Pirkei Avot class going on now on Sunday mornings, but there's another volume of Pirkei Avot that I think you should all own. If you don't own it, let me know. I can get it for reduced prices, or you can buy it yourself. This is the Pirkei Avot that is part of the Lev Shalem series. So the same people that wrote our prayer book and wrote our Machzor, the Rabbinical Assembly, wrote this book. And the way they did it is that it's the Hebrew and the English, and then two different commentators. Both are incredible sages of our time. One is Harabah Tamar Elad Applebaum, who is a Masorti rabbi, an Israeli rabbi. She's, I think, 10th generation Yerushalmi, a Jerusalemite, and she founded a community in Jerusalem called Sion, which is she calls it Israeli Judaism. It's egalitarian, it's text-based, it's Shomer Mitzvot. She does one of the commentaries, and the other is Rabbi Gordon Tucker, who is vice chancellor of the Jewish Theological Seminary right now. He is, besides many things, he holds a PhD in philosophy from the fine institution that is a half a mile from where I'm sitting right now, from Princeton, and was dean of the rabbinical school when I was a kinder there. So this is the version you should get, and if you need help getting it, let me know. So now to Rabbi Eisen, Dr. Eisen, Rethinking Modern Judaism. Jane, thank you.
There is popularity of a different sort of explanation and motivation. Nostalgia, far more a reason of the heart than of the mind, a recognizable area of life located in private time and space, as the new rules for particularist religious loyalty demanded, is organized around regular performances which lend performers the conviction that they are carrying on the essence of their ancestors' faith and practice, even while they alter both belief and observance to suit their new circumstances.
How do you feel about this one, this definition of mitzvah? of a reason for doing mitzvot. Any of you do it for these reasons? I think I do sometimes.
I kind of even read the prayers about the sacrifices with that idea, sort of in mind, not personal nostalgia, but you know, when I read about the sacrifices, I don't think about myself doing them, but I just think about the awesome idea that our Torah has been around so long that it even worked for people back in the days when they thought in terms of sacrifices.
That's interesting that they brought, I mean, I try to teach our bar and bat mitzvah kids that sacrifice, and their parents, that sacrifice really is about finding ways to come close to holiness. And that would be different in our day, but that's how they did it.
Right. I mean, I was just, the people in those days in the Middle East all had sacrifices. So I think maybe God had to give it to them in a way that they were used to thinking of it, but then moving away from that eventually.
Yeah. Okay. Was there anyone else who wanted to say anything about nostalgia? Someone, I've been asking, yeah, Rini?
I'll just say one quick thing. When my grandmother died, she had 3 daughters. Well, she had them before she died too. But I was very close with her, and her daughters gave me her Shabbat candlesticks. And so I started lighting them, and I promised her in my mind that, I mean, I lit them anyway, but because they were my grandmother's and she was observant and I was very close to her, I promised her I would light them every Friday night, which I have for about 58 years when I'm home, you know. And so that's nostalgic, but it's a big part of my life.
Beautiful. Beautiful. So I want to say that I knew we were not going to go through all these texts tonight. And I think that there's a lot here and that we're going to do some of them next week. I think we could do one more, and then maybe you can read some on your own, but we'll go over them again next week because you can't not do the Heschel mitzvah as a spiritual gesture is just magnificent. But let's talk about folkways. I think that there's no Jewish community that hasn't been influenced by Mordechai Kaplan. My previous shul, before I got there was a pool under the shul, an Olympic-sized pool under the synagogue. And it was from this idea that Kaplan came up with of the synagogue as the Jewish community center. He wanted the synagogue to be the place. And I often think about when I walk in here and we don't have a name that is Hebrew for our synagogue. I wish we did, but we're called the Jewish Center. I think that came from Kaplan. So you'll see that in a little bit when we read the Kaplan piece. From the book Judaism as a Civilization. Who would like to read?
I'll read, Rabbi.
Yeah, and if you can read sort of fast till we get to the old.
Okay. In Jewish tradition, all religious observances, civil laws, and ethical principles are equally designed mitzvot or commandments.
Designated, yes.
Designated mitzvot or commandments. The implication is that they were all decreed by God. Even though some of us no longer regard the traditional practices as commanded by God, we may still refer to them as mitzvot, provided we avowedly use that term in a metaphorical sense. Should our spiritual well-being, however, require the change or abrogation of any of those practices, in fact, that they are designated mitzvot ought not to exercise any inhibitive influence.
Oh, this is big.
Wow.
Right? This is really big. There's no siyag here. There's no, fence around the Torah here. He said you could still call it a mitzvah, as long as you don't think that you have to do it if there's a reason not to do it. Okay, let's keep going.
But it is of vital importance to have a significant term besides mitzvot for those customs which have been referred to as commandments pertaining to the relations between man and God.
And I bet that you would be someone who would say people and God at this point in history. So yeah.
People and God. A term is needed that would indicate a different approach from that with which we come to positive law or jurisprudence. The term folkways means that requirements in the tradition, In the traditional literature, the term minhag denotes a ritual. Practice. Oh, it's the next page. Ritual practice for where there does not seem to be a basis in the author's authoritative writings, and which by the mere reason of its being in vogue exercises a claim on conformity.
Okay, so these are two important terms that he talks about. One is folkways. He brings this to the forefront of Jewish tradition that some mitzvot are our folkways. It's what we do. And they are maybe the Hebrew minhag. Now, interesting, minhag tradition. In many observant communities, minhag takes on the level of law. In fact, there is a phrase, minhag avotenu biyadenu, that the minhagim of our ancestors are what we do. And Kaplan's saying, no, wait a second. We do some of them, and they are a way to talk about our cultural doings. Maybe they're not commanded to us. Okay, let's go to the really important piece. You want to keep going? You want a new reader, or are you good?
If someone else wants to read, that's fine. Otherwise, I'll continue. Oh,
go ahead.
Okay. Okay, if we were henceforth to designate all commandments pertaining to the relations between man and God as minhagim or folkways, we would accomplish a twofold purpose. First, we would convey the thought that they should not be dealt with in a legalistic spirit, a spirit that often gives rise to quibbling and pettifogging. They should be dealt with as a very
fabulous word. I expect in the next, I would like to see Sam Daly Harris in your next New York Times article use the word pettifogging. That would make me really happy. Okay.
They should be dealt with as the very stuff of Jewish life, which should be experienced with spontaneity and joy, and which can be modified as circumstances require. Secondly,
so yeah, they can be modified as circumstances required. Yeah, go ahead.
Secondly, we should convey the implication that not only should as many commandments or folkways as possible be retained and developed, but that Jewish life should be stimulated to evolve new and additional folkways. Folkways are the social practices by which a people externalizes the reality of its collective being.
Okay, we have to let that brilliance sit for a moment. What are some examples of this? Mike, do you have something?
Yes, in cultural anthropology, it starts in a society, starts with folkways that become ethics and then become law.
Yeah, and he's sort of doing it, he's flipping it and saying the laws could be designated not as law, but as folkways and what the Jews do, which will play into how Eisen thinks of mitzvot, what the Jews do. So the collective reality, by the way, it seems, I'm looking on the screen, is that I was watching, I'm thinking about tefillah a lot and what can invigorate our services and what can make them feel so joyful and festive. And now I'm looking around the country to see places that use music. And I was watching one of my favorite shuls, Ikar, today, one of their services, and thinking about okay, we are, our community, the model of what we just read in one way. I'll tell you, we use instruments in the synagogue on Friday nights, but not Saturdays.
Why?
Well, I mean, we've created this cultural milieu here where we've changed what it feels like needed to be changed while didn't change other things, because that group of people wanted that sense of a service. I wonder how we will evolve in the future. I'm going to go on. I'm going to just ask for hands down. I want to finish 1 second. Mike, give me 1 second. The reinterpretation of commandments pertaining to the relations between man and God as folkways has been facilitated by having been designated and treated in recent years as ceremonies. Remember earlier when I said, isn't that crazy that people are calling things mitzvahs? These ceremonies. So I want to leave you with a couple questions for you to think about this week. First of all, read these texts again, read the Mendelssohn, go and read the Heschel and the rest of this one, and the Neil Gilman and the Fishbane. Heschel and Gilman, I think, are the most important ones you'll read. And Gilman, of blessed memory, was my teacher. And then what I'd like to ask you to think about, and even write about if you want, but think about, is where does your desire to do mitzvot come from? And how do you define mitzvah? And I really believe it's going to be different for most of you. Like, you're not all going to be the same or the same with me. And it might not even be the same in any one time in your life, or even how you look at one mitzvah. So think about the history of mitzvot, which are here, but then let's think about how we each define mitzvah for ourselves. Before I end, are there any comments? Mike, you're first, and then anyone else. And then
Yes.
Mike.
Well, right here in our Jewish Center, you may not believe it, but behind the bema is a space for an organ. And I was on the committee that redesigned the sanctuary without Gershon as its leader. And that was considered for quite some time. But the thought was, we don't know what the future is going to be. The people may want it. So it's there.
Wow, that's wonderful. I grew up in a shul with an organ. That's cool. A conservative shul with an organ. And love music. Okay, Michael Golden. Yeah.
There's a couple of lines in Torah which I interpret as giving us permission to expand what is mitzvah. In Deuteronomy, Moses says, do what is right and good in the sight of the Lord.
Hatov yashar b'nei Hashem, yeah? Yeah.
And then Micah says, what does God really want of us? To do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly in the sight of God. So it's giving you permission to expand your definition of mitzvah, that if you feel it's good and right in the sight of the Lord, that's an approval to go and do that thing.
Yes, and it's what the community will uphold. And
Fair
it's
enough.
what it's a lot of, it's what the community will uphold. It's the push and pull of nostalgia, like how much has to be the same and how much can change. I want to let people know that if you are interested, I am doing an in-person spa for the soul this Saturday in the youth lounge from 9 to 10. And then you can, or 9 to 9:50 or so, at the Jewish Center. And it is, I think some of you come to my spa for the soul. Lee Garber has been to them for many years. And anyone else, I don't know, has been to the spa for the soul. So thank you. Hi, Michelle. We're going to do some chanting. We're going to rely on a lot of tunes from my teacher, Shefa Gold, and from all of the work of Navati Hila, which is a renewal congregation in Jerusalem, but I learned with their one of their guys, Yoel Sykes. And I've been doing this for about 5 or 6 years, different versions of this. Spa for the Soul will do some meditation and some learning and some chanting, just a different kind of tefillah. And then we'll go in for the Torah service. Actually, we'll be there for the Amidah probably as well. So also on Saturday, our newish congregant, Seth Fishman, he's going to be teaching a lunch and learn. Seth has spent many, many years as a gabbai to Reb Zalman Schachter Shalomi, and he will be teaching about Reb Zalman's teachings. So lots of stuff going on this week. And so keep reading. You can mark on your calendars March 11th at Lunch and Learn, which will be Myra teaching us and describing us about her time in Jerusalem and all the stuff she's learned.
Thank you. I will also be teaching in the library minyan this Shabbos from about 10:30 to 11:30.
Okay. And if you want to help Suzanne and the Kiddush crew, they gather at the Jewish Center at 11 a.m. on Friday to make lunch for everyone. It's so good to see each of you. Does anyone have anything they need or want to say? A good thing of your week or anything you want to say and bring to the world?
Yeah, I have a little something to say. I got accepted into a PhD program to fulfill. Thank you, to fulfill my Tikkun Olam pursuit, or my signature mitzvot to do research on education. So I'm very, very happy just to learn about it yesterday.
Where will you be, Najat?
In Buffalo, New York.
Oh, so we'll see you online.
Yeah, I didn't accept it yet. I'm still waiting for other universities. Okay. But yeah, that's the good news.
Well, we hope to meet you in person at some point. Come on over to the Jewish Center.
I will, I promise.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else have anything they need or want to say? Okay, I'm going to go practice davening with Avi and Bob Lebo. We're trying to really up our davening game and work on a davening team approach with lots of daveners. So if you're interested in being part of a davening team, let me know. If you have a lot of ruach, a lot of soul, and I thank you